Well, hello there. Welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. Well, we are now on episode 10 of our Backlog Treasure series. This is the series on the channel where I'll go back to my titles that are in my backlog, titles that I have been on my shelf for 2 years, 3 years, maybe even longer, or even titles that maybe haven't been in my backlog that long. Maybe I've had them for less than a year, maybe 6 months. But they're titles that I haven't yet gotten around to watching. And I've made a concerted effort to say, look, I've got to go through my collection and titles that I have not seen, that have been on my shelf collecting dust. I need to start watching some of these titles. I don't want to just collect films and not watch these movies. That defeats the purpose of collecting films. So I want to make sure I'm actually watching the titles that I'm picking up and not just collecting a bunch of films, but not end up watching these films. So I've made an effort to do that, and I've gone through a number of films in my backlog, and I've really been having a good time going through films in my Criterion Collection. And a title that I picked up a couple of years ago, I think I picked this title up in the November 2020 sale. And this is a title that comes in at spy number 1009 in the collection, stars two of my favorite classic Hollywood period actors, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, a film from George Cukor from 1938, and it's Holiday. This is a wonderful romantic comedy film that I am so excited that I've finally gotten around to watching. And this is a title that came out in, I think, around June of 1938. So this came out near the middle of 1938, and it came out a few months after another film starring these same two stars came out earlier that year called Bringing Up Baby, which came out earlier in 1938, starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. So this is a fascinating film directed by Howard Hawks. Of course, this is directed by George Cukor. Holiday, fascinating film that I will tell you about. But this film came out 2 years before this film, The Philadelphia Story, which also starred Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, and Jimmy Stewart in this case. The Philadelphia Story by George Cukor from 1940. But today we're talking about Holiday. Now, this is a fascinating romantic comedy, and I really enjoy going through this release. Now, I enjoyed the film. There are a few special features on here that you'll want to know about, and a nice essay that I'll get to in just a moment. But let me read the back of this case here. It says, 2 years before stars Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and director George Cukor would collaborate on The Philadelphia Story, they brought their timeless talents to this delectable slice of 1930s romantic comedy perfection. The second film adaptation of a hit 1928 play by Philip Barry. So this film is based on a play from Philip Barry. Grant is at his charismatic best as the acrobatically inclined free spirit who, following a whirlwind engagement, literally tumbles into the lives of his fiance's aristocratic family, setting up a clash of values with her staid father while firing the rebellious imagination of her brash black sheep sister Hepburn. With a sparkling surface and an undercurrent of melancholy, Holiday is an enchanting ode to nonconformists and pie-in-the-sky dreamers everywhere, as well as a thoughtful reflection on what it truly means to live well. Very nice summation of this film, and I have to say I really enjoyed this romantic comedy. This is a very fascinating film in that if I had to sum up a couple of key points to take away from this film, of course, you have Cary Grant. In this film, he plays Johnny Case. So he is a young man. He gets into a whirlwind relationship with Doris Nolan, who plays Julie Seton in this film. Julie Seton is from an aristocratic family. Her older sister is played by Katharine Hepburn, Linda Seton. Of course, her father is played by Henry Coker. He plays Edward Seton, the father of this aristocratic family. So you have Cary Grant, who is coming from a working class background. He tumbles into a relationship with this, high society aristocratic family, and he's more of a free spirit. He's more trying to figure himself out, figure out what he wants to do. And he's not wanting to be tied down to the high demands of this aristocratic society that he could be potentially marrying into. And so it's a very interesting sort of clash of wills that goes on in this story. And this story deals a lot with that whole class warfare between the middle class and the working class people and the more wealthy aristocratic folks, and the value of money and treating money like it's a god. As Katharine Hepburn says early on in this movie, that, that in their family, money is like a god to them. And so, Cary Grant is sitting there thinking, I don't know if I value money like that. Of course, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? I don't know if I love money to that degree. I don't know if I worship money, And so it's that clash of values of, do I fit into the very stodgy lifestyle of this aristocratic family if I marry this girl here? Would I be trapped into the trappings of that aristocratic setup? Or do I want to live a more free-spirited life where I can pursue my own dreams and kind of chart my own way in life, And so that's what he wants his fiance to do, is say, hey, go off with me and let's chart our own course. We don't have to depend on your family's money. We'll find our own way. We'll make our own way. And of course, she, being from an aristocratic family, not necessarily wanting to take that risk. And so you sort of have that conflict. And of course, Katharine Hepburn, the sister, Linda Seaton, is also sort of more of a free-spirited person. So you sort of see where this story is probably going to end up going in terms of ultimately, Cary Grant's character, he plays Johnny Case. Ultimately, Johnny Case and Linda are going to find their way together. It's just a matter of how the twists and turns of the story get them there. So that is a big part of the story of Holiday. It's just that class warfare between the aristocrats, the working class people, the values of aristocratic society versus working class society, and just how we value money in our world. And it's the type of thing that makes me think that this is a film from 1938, but it very much speaks to today's society. It's one of those things that, some things change, but some things remain the same. And this is really an example of that. This is a film that's almost 80 years old, but the values and the human conflicts at play are very much played out today, just as they were back in the late 1930s. So I found that fascinating. I think the film itself is very interesting to watch. Of course, you see Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, fairly young in their careers, and you see them getting into some athletic and acrobatic feats in this film that's, pretty interesting to watch. And just the banter between them and all the characters in this film. Of course, you had the father. He was played by Henry Cukor. I thought he did a really nice job. His back and forth with Cary Grant's character, I thought was really fascinating, as the father and the potential suitor sort of going at it, trying to, size each other up. So I thought that was interesting. And just the relationship between, of course, Case here. Is it Case or Chase? Case, sorry, Johnny Case. And the Julie Seaton, I'm messing up the names here, I'm sorry. Julie Seaton, played by Doris Nolan, seeing their relationship and kind of realizing probably not going to work out. And then seeing, of course, Katharine Hepburn, how she's interjected into the mix and ultimately, becomes perhaps a better fit for Mr. Case. So Holidays, fascinating romantic comedy that I can definitely recommend. The special features on this edition are pretty light. Of course, you have a new conversation between the Michael Schlesinger, who's a filmmaker and distributor, and a film critic, Michael Schragow, that I highly recommend. They talk a lot about George Cukor, the director, and his history, and the fact that, he made this film from 1938. He made The Philadelphia Story in 1940, but he was making films up into the 1980s. And so they talk about him as a director and how he was more of a behind the scenes type of director. He wasn't a director that you could attach a certain signature style to. He was pretty much an under the current type of a director. And because of it, it's part of what made him great as a director, is part of what they were saying. And just talking about the history of, where this film fits in the history of films. This film came out in the late 1930s, so early in the sound era. Of course, the silent era ended around 1930. This is from 1938. And so this is early on in the talkies period. And so they talk about this film's place in history and just that whole evolution going on in the decade of the 1930s as the industry was evolving from the silent era to the sound era. So I thought that was really fascinating. So that's a great discussion between those two Michaels. You have an audio excerpt on here that features George Cukor, which is very good. You have a costume gallery that you can sort of scroll through with your remote that shows the costumes, the gowns, and the outfits in the film, mostly from the female characters in this film. And then on the inside here, check this out. Check out that disc art and check out this insert, which is very nice. You see the external, the front and back cover of the case. Really nice. And on the inside here, check out this nice picture here. Very interesting part of this film early on. Of course, you see Katharine Hepburn. This is her introduction in the film as she's sort of not, I guess, barging into the room, so to speak, not intentionally, but she makes a pretty grand appearance as these two characters here, Cary Grant and his fiance-to-be are kissing. She sort of comes into the screen here, and it's sort of a foreshadowing of what is to come, ultimately her coming into the mix of things. But very interesting scene early on in this film. But this essay that's included in this insert, Play Notes by Dana Stevens, it's Dana Stevens, right? Yeah, by Dana Stevens, is excellent because this essay does a really nice job of talking about the early career of both Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and how they had to sort of work their way up in the Hollywood system. Of course, Katharine Hepburn played in the stage play from Philip Barry that this film is based on. So she was an understudy in that stage play. And so it talks about her work as an understudy and learning the craft of acting in the late 1920s. And then of course it talks about Cary Grant, how his career started out and how when he came to Hollywood, he would get cast with stronger female leads and how he had to work his way up to being a leading man in Hollywood. So found that to be very fascinating. Great essay in here. And of course, you also get information about the transfer, which is very nice. The film looks really good on Blu-ray. Was very happy with the Blu-ray presentation and it sounds just fine as well. So a really nice presentation overall. So this is a very nice addition from the Criterion Collection that I'm really happy I finally got around to watching. It's been a couple years since I picked this up, almost a couple years. So it was in my backlog. I went ahead and pulled it out, dusted it off, popped it in my player, and I really enjoyed it. And I think if you pick this up, you just might enjoy it as well. Holiday from 1938 from George Cukor, starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. Let me know in the comment section what you think of this film if you have seen it. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you have a favorite film from George Cukor. Of course, he has Holiday. He also has Philadelphia Story. These are the two films from him that I'm most familiar with. But like I said, he made films for multiple decades up into the 1980s. So let me know if you have a favorite from George Cukor or if you have a favorite film that Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant have appeared in. Let me know your favorites in the comment section below. As always, thanks for watching and we'll look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Peace.